So how long do you have to wait until you can take the casting out of the pressure pot? I'll be answering this question in this episode of Quick Tips. So how long do you have to wait before you can release the pressure and take the casting out of the pressure pot? I get this question quite a bit, and it's a good question, and as usual, the answer is it depends. It mainly depends on three factors. What type of resin are you using? That's a big one. What is the temperature in the shop, and how much resin are you casting at once? How much resin is in the mold? So before we go into anything that has to even do with resin, let's talk about what are we doing with the pressure pot so that you can kind of understand why you need to leave it in for a certain amount of time. The pressure pot is removing, and I'm going to use air quotes, removing air bubbles from the resin, basically. It doesn't actually physically remove them, it's collapsing them to such a small extent that they're effectively not there anymore. So, knowing that, what we're waiting for, the amount of time you need to wait or leave your casting in the pressure pot is the amount of time it takes for the resin to harden up enough that you can release the pressure and the air bubbles are not going to re-expand. So the number that you're looking for, or how you can kind of tell a good guideline, is going to be whatever the demold time is for the resin you're using. And every manufacturer should either have on their website, if you call their technical service or technical hotline, or usually just in the instructions, you'll find that demold time. And typically that is assuming that it's about room temperature in the shop or wherever you're casting, so like 70, 72 degrees. So that's why temperature kind of affects things. If it's lower than 70, then the demold time is going to be longer because the resin needs to get, hotter to cure, basically. And it's starting out at a lower temperature. So that's what we're looking for, is demold time, and then what temperature is it? I generally recommend, I wouldn't recommend casting in temperatures under 50 degrees. You're probably going to get curing problems. I personally wouldn't cast under 60 degrees, and you're much better staying at least around 70, 65, 70, 75. That's kind of the perfect zone for resin casting. Now, how much resin are you casting? That's the other problem, or other question, I should say. If you're doing, label blanks where you're casting the tube in a mold and you're really only using a very small amount of resin, that's going to take a lot longer than something that, like a 3 pen blank mold. So this is probably, a lot of the examples are going to be geared towards like pen blank making or turning blanks, but it works for, silicone molds. However much resin you're using, that's going to be a factor in this. Now, I've found that if you're making at least like about a pen blank, so about 100, 150 grams, you can, and more, you can generally follow whatever the manufacturer states as the demold time. Again, assuming that it's about 70 degrees in the shop. Now, if you're casting something very small amounts, under 100 grams, it's going to extend it quite a bit. Now, I've found for these label blanks, when I'm doing tube-in casting and I'm using Alumilite clear, I got to be honest, I just leave them in overnight because I don't want to chance it. That just ensures that it's going to be hard, everything's going to come out nice, crystal clear, basically. So I can kind of cover Alumilite white and Alumilite clear. I'll give you kind of some ideas of what's going on with those two resins. I don't really know what the demold times are for a lot of the other resins. I will say that the polyester resin and epoxy, like the really long open time ones, they are generally like 9 hours. Like it's going to be an overnight affair for sure, regardless of the amount of resin. So again, look on the box. It's just, that's, in my experience, that's usually what you're looking at for those types of resins. Now, Alumilite white is pretty fast. Their demold time stated on the instructions is 12 minutes. I usually leave it in for about an hour, regardless. I want to make sure that there's no air bubbles. So minimum 30 minutes, but I usually just err on the side of caution and leave it in for an hour. Alumilite clear, regular set. So that's the 5-minute open time version of Alumilite clear. That's probably about an hour. And again, we're talking about a decent amount of resin, somewhere 150 grams or above for both of these. For Alumilite slow set clear, that's the 12-minute open time version. That one has a demold time of 2 to 4 hours. So for 3 blank molds, when I'm doing Alumilite Clear with this mold, it holds about 280 grams or so of resin. I usually leave it in for about 2.5 hours, same for even a 6 blank mold. So larger quantities, I usually 2.5 hours for sure. If I'm only doing like single pen tubes, stuff like that, I pretty much leave it in overnight just to make sure that everything's good, because that's a slower setting resin. And I've even found that it's just better to kind of leave it in longer. It's easier to demold pen, like the PVC pipes. They come out a lot easier, which means that it's hardened more. So I hope that kind of helps out a little bit. Just a couple guidelines. I will say that when I'm using the tube in molds like this, when I'm doing pretty small amounts, I think these are about 30 or so grams of resin for each one of these, overnight. I don't even mess with it. I just leave it in there overnight, do it at the end of the day, come back, pop the pressure pot, and I'm good to go. So I hope that kind of helps out. If you have any comments or questions, definitely leave those down below. I'm out there on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can kind of see what's up in the shop kind of on a daily basis. I'm also doing live streaming on Twitch. So we do Dunk and Junk, and we do the resin casting on Wednesday, and we turn the projects up, the blanks that we made, on Saturday. So both days, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. And I hope to see you out there. It's a good time. We have fun with it. We're just doing kind of resin casting experiments. It's a good place to learn about resin casting. I go through a lot of tips. As far as I'm concerned, it's the best place to learn resin casting, especially for blank making, anywhere. So hope to see you out there. And until next time, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.